Hey, Ignacio, you here to join the Return of the Mac Elevate Your Brownfields application?
I'm here to watch you.
Hi, everyone. It is 2 o'clock. Well, at least on the East Coast, it's 2 o'clock. But if you're somewhere else, well, that's what time it is for you. So, welcome. We are happy to be presenting again the Return of the Mac Elevate Your Brownfields application. And before we get into this, want to just go over a few housekeeping items. First, reminders, the webinar will be recorded and uploaded to CCL's website, the Center for Creative Land Recycling, and YouTube channel. So these are hyperlinked. Also, these slides will be presented and provided so in a follow-up email. So we're also going to be having an evaluation survey as well as some polling questions, which you probably are already doing right now. Please use the Q&A box for any questions that come up during the webinar, and the chat box will be used only for comments. Okay, so here are some general questions, just a quick poll. Please go through them. I believe there's 3 or 4 questions. We just want to know a little bit about you guys to help us gauge some of the things that we talk about, maybe some of the things that we concentrate on. While you guys are doing that, we'll just give that a second. You have to scroll down to your other questions. Great. All right, quite a few of you have not applied. Most of you have not applied, about 71%. Okay.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Look at these go-getters, Ignacio. Less than 5 weeks and people are up for the challenge. We love it. Okay.
Well, we are eager to start going. So
yeah. I think we are good because looks like nobody's up for the multi-purpose challenge, though. Most people are all types. All right. So with that, I'm going to close the poll because we have a lot to get into.
And
all right.
Share the results.
Share the results. All right. And of course, we're going to give out some huge shout outs and props to Sarah and Lujane, who are our background support people at CCL, and they are awesome. So thank you, Lujane and Sarah. And without further ado, we are going to get into this. Quick agenda. We just went over housekeeping. CCL and services. Ignacio, I'm going to hand over to you. We're going to go over why apply, what's changed, the must-dos, insights, tips, and of course, open mic and questions, which we hope you have brought all those. But of course, if we don't get to the questions, all of your questions today, you can certainly email us and we're happy to address those. Okay. So I'm Joelle Greenland. I'm a senior planning consultant for CCL. I've been in this arena for a couple of decades. And I'm a Brownfields geek, and I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Ignacio.
Well, I'm Ignacio Dairit. I'm a lead program consultant for CCL. And with Joelle, we probably put together 50 years of Brownfields experience here, including, I would say, 30, 35 years on mark. So you're on the mark if you're on this webinar.
Oh boy, here come the jokes. Everybody strap in. We're gonna get a lot of them.
And a little bit about CCL. Many of you may be familiar, and if you're new to CCL, welcome. We are a national nonprofit. It's our 25th year promoting sustainable, equitable, and responsible reuse of underutilized properties. And we do this by educating, advocating, assisting in various ways to get you to where you want to be, including getting those EPA grants. We want to make you eligible. We want to make you write your best grant. This is, of course, this webinar, we are not going to cover the basics. So if you are new, we're going to show you the resources. And if you are hopefully in our regions, which are region 9 and 10, our services are free. And listed there are a number of services that we provide as part of our services here. Which are covered by our technical assistance to brownfields communities. And Joel, do you have anything to add here? I mean, we're talking about grant writing, assistance, and reviews here, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we help with.
Yeah, I think this covers a lot of these things. We do a lot of also helping folks recently with inventories, brownfield inventories. It doesn't have to be complicated. So if you're starting out, my biggest thing is that there are so many resources, and the brownfield community is very open, cross-pollinates all the time. And of course, we even have in Region 10 and in some areas of Region 9 peer groups that get together too. So reach out, we'll get you connected. If you're not in Region 9 and 10 and you're listening, we'll get you to the right people. Okay.
And one thing I point before leaving the slide, Joel, one thing again, we don't cover it a lot here, but included in the environmental translations is the meaning of brownfields. Again, these sites do not need to be known contaminated sites.
Right. We thought about having that, the obligatory brownfield definition, but we figured, with this crew, I think you already know what a brownfield is, but it doesn't necessarily have to have, a declaration of contamination. Okay. So with that, we're going to go into the why apply, right, Ignacio?
Yes, we will.
Why are you guys going to go into this pain?
Well, going back to the original message is you have projects. We're not saying you have dirty sites. We're talking that you have projects, and some of that might be fundable under brownfields grants, and it covers all of those activities.
Right. It's not just the usual stuff that everybody thinks of. Cleanup, assessment. There's a lot of other things that these funds also cover that if you haven't looked at, you should check out the EPA website under these grants as to what activities are eligible, because they are a lot broader than most people usually think. Okay.
And more recently, we are talking about climate change. You've heard about EJ40, and that's a main focus that we'll be talking about later. And all these sites we're talking about, we're looking for second acts, maybe even third acts for some of these sites.
Yeah. Justice 40 and environmental justice and CJS. So we'll get into all that because that's some of the things that have changed, or I should say emphasize this time.
And the more you actually interconnect these in your grant applications, the better.
Yep.
But why aren't people doing this more, Joel?
For every reason that's up here, honestly. I think the biggest thing is not understanding the system in which these brownfields live. And I think you already nailed it on the head, Ignacio. They're not sites per se. They are projects. And you need to see them as holistic in the community and in the area that they reside in, because they're not just one little site. And if you think that way myopically, you won't give the site its full due as far as the potential and what you can do on these things.
As looking at the participants we had here, I'm surprised there's only one municipality that signed up, which is interesting. A lot of these, the communities, I mean, if you can back up, a lot of you.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, a lot of the applicants will be helping your partners through these issues. Because it's always, while you have projects and reuses, there is still the environmental liability and risk that's holding up these projects of yours. So that's what we're trying, these grants are trying to do. So, and that's why we want more people to be doing more of this.
Right. Why do we even include these slides on this grant? Because I'm sure you're saying, can we just get to the meat and potatoes of this? The thing is, guys, is that all these bullet points, you should be saying yes and to, because all these things will help you. If you understand the no's, you'll understand the yeses. And that, I mean, if you know the cost, then you can write your grant better. If you know the regulations, you understand the game that you're playing in, right? If you understand that the road is not easy, then you'll also understand that the more stakeholders and the more strength in those relationships, the more competitive your grant is. It's not just, yeah, we hold monthly meetings. What do you do in those monthly meetings? And what has come out of those relationships? What are those outcomes in addition to the ones that you were trying to show EPA that you're going to do with this funding should you receive it? Okay.
So this year, we don't have a revolving loan fund. So
Sorry.
why we say Mark all the time, and this year it's really the MAC. We'll have the RLF next year, and these are due, tada, the 13th. So we are
Short
5
time
weeks.
frame. So this is the first year that I've ever seen where it's in a long time that it's less than 60 days from the time that they announced it. So, but here's a hot link for EPA Mark grant application resources. That page is filled with catacombs of stuff that can help you. But honestly, you've got less than 5 weeks. My biggest tip is start writing. Just really start writing.
Right, and the application resources, it has, in addition to the guidelines, it has the webinars that have the basics that we won't be covering today, and there are also the certain threshold issues that we might not, that EPA is better suited to help you with rather than going to CCL, and we'll mention those things.
Right, the threshold criteria, which is the first part of the grant that you're going to have to get through, which is the first 2 weeks after you've applied. You're going to have to get through threshold criteria, and each grant has threshold criteria. Others have more than some, but you have to meet those, and if you don't, you are automatically taken out of the race. Okay. So what do we have, Ignacio?
Well, there's good news. Yeah, there's good news, bad news here.
Bad news.
Yeah, you have 5 weeks, but then look at all this money, which means a lot of people probably will bow out because, you know, they think they don't have time.
Right.
And so that's a trade-off. This 5 weeks will be compressed, and look at all these the offerings here. Much more. If this were a regular EPA year without the bipartisan infrastructure law, we'd have what's on the right column.
Right. The regular appropriations. And what's so important about the bill appropriations is, do you see how the cleanup dollars fall in that column? Also the states and tribe assessment. But the reason, right, the cleanup usually has a 20% cost share. And if I'm not mistaken, the Bill Act takes away that 20% requirement. Okay, which is it's another great thing about these grants. Okay, no 20% cost share. Okay. So we've got some key changes, right, Ignacio?
Not as many as there were before.
No, thank goodness.
Yes.
But new communities are always encouraged to apply. And as we saw in this chart before, right? Do you see how it says community-wide assessment new and community-wide existing? They're still 30-30, but if you're a new community, you're going to be put into another bucket, if you will. Okay, so if you've never applied, and we have plenty of those on the line here, right? You have, you know, you're in the race with other people who have never applied, which is good, right? You're not going up against somebody who's had 9 grants before. Okay, that's always a good thing in my book.
And
Okay.
yeah, another point there is, if you're a smaller community though, and you don't think you want to apply, but there are other smaller entities like yours that want to form a coalition with a state or a county, then you can join the assessment coalition group. And again, that really just opens it up for a lot of newer communities.
Yeah.
We want to bring more communities into the brownfields fold.
So I think one of the biggest things for me, I don't mean to jump over, and sorry for the acronym, the participant support costs, they are clarified, one per target area. And what this basically means, I know, Ignacio, you're smiling because we were just discussing this, is that there's an entity under programmatic support costs, and we won't spend too much time on this, but you can't have, 5 entities doing programmatic support costs and they're all over the place, and there's specific parameters, and one of them is 1 per target area. So if you have 1 target area, that means you can only have 1 entity doing programmatic support costs. Okay. One of the biggest things I heard when we were talking with EPA about these guidelines and stuff when they came out is under the outputs and outcomes. Historically, right, Ignacio, we've seen who's the lead, what's the task, here's the output, right? We're going to do 12 phase 1s, and then we're going to do 3 phase 2. We're going to have 1 cleanup plan, right? Those are outputs, right? The numbers, the quantity, that's the true definition. Same thing with outcomes. We're going to do so many acres, or we're going to have this many housing, or whatever. Fine. The thing is, EPA is not stressing that. So watch this section very, very carefully. The wording has changed. The wording has changed to, what is your plan for outputs and outcomes? Plan. Don't just describe the number, or what's the plan to actually do it. So this is the what, this is the how. Okay. This is a huge, huge distinction. If you just put those numbers down, you're going to hear the tough love from us if you send it to us for a review. But what else? What did you think about that?
Well, going to this again,
distinction.
and that's primarily because a lot of grant applications, successful grant applications, there are lots out there. People tend to copy them without thinking about if they apply to them.
Right.
And so you really have to think, I mean, does this apply to me? Or, do you just not use those examples, or at least not copy them verbatim? You really have to think about how it applies to you. And that's really, how you make that grant yours. Each grant application has to be unique. It can't be a cookie cutter from some other place in some other community. So that's what really resonates. And there's actually, the other one, and the other key here, which Joel is probably the leading expert, is the procurement.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Well, at least not within the EPA. I mean, outside the EPA, procurement, between Joel and I, we field many questions on procurement. I'm assuming a lot of private entities are here, and we can. These are very location specific and specific to your project and what you have to do and your circumstance. So there is no one answer, and we can provide some tips, which come in the Q&A. But that's probably the other, big difference this year. And I don't know, Joel, is there anything else on this list that you?
Well, the $5 million cleanup. So I'm hoping a lot of people are going up and hopefully addressing some of these legacy properties that need a lot more money than the historical 1 million or even 2 million. So there's 5 million. Yes, there's only 8 of them, but I would say that is a ton of money just in, projects. If you've got a pipeline of projects, remember, cleanup grants don't have to just be at one site. So if you've got a pipeline of projects that need, up to 5 million, if you have 4 million, go for it, we'll get a little bit more into procurement too in another slide. But
Right.
yes,
And,
there's,
yeah.
go ahead.
And in actually in that municipal in those grants, some of you might not when you do your work plan, you might not cover the amount you're going for.
Right.
In Won't might total the max, but that's another key change in EPA is that they actually separated out put it in a different section what's your process for adding new sites
Right.
into
That's
your work
true.
plan.
Right. Because what's been happening is sometimes projects remember that eligibility. So when we're talking about threshold criteria is whether you're eligible to apply for these grants. Okay. Eligibility of the sites is not determined at this point. Okay. That is determined after you receive the award. And at that point, what Ignacio just mentioned, a work plan, once you have, been selected, then you have to do a work plan. And from that work plan, you put in your priority sites. If one of these sites it's not eligible, turns out to be ineligible, then it's like, okay, now what are we doing with this? So that's why they want a plan that if that comes, about, that how are you going to identify other properties? Okay. So that would probably only happen with assessment because cleanup, you are going to need an APCA, alternative brownfields, to clean up with analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives. So for cleanup grants. All right, moving on. So we've gone over the key changes. So the must-dos, you're going to hear this from us, but starting early
or
for
started
me,
already.
for me, starting early is in quotes, okay? Because starting early for me, as someone who's written these grants from before acres, okay? Starting early for me is 6 months ago, honestly, because I'm bringing everyone together and, it's an iterative process. So for me, that was 6 months ago. I don't know about you, Ignacio, what early means to you, but it is what it is, right? Can't cry over spilt milk. You got under 5 weeks. So we're going to get into our timeline here in a little bit, but just start writing. Seriously, just 20 minutes a day or something. Everything counts. The other thing is sam.gov. Okay. If you've never done this before and you do not have an account in grants.gov or sam.gov, you need sam.gov to get a unique entity ID for your entity. If you don't know if you have a unique entity ID, go find your finance person of your organization and say, do we have a unique entity ID? And if they say, was that our DUNS number? You say, well, they don't accept DUNS anymore, right? As Ignacio loves to say, don't be a DUNS. DUNS does not exist anymore when it comes to, it just doesn't exist anymore. You now have what's called a unique entity ID. It changed back in April of 2022. So if you're new, that happened. And if you need a unique entity ID, you need to do this today because it takes several weeks to get one of these. And you cannot apply for a grant, even a federal grant, a brownfield grant, without a unique entity ID. You will need that to get into grants.gov and set up an account, okay? You should have one, okay? But so ask around. Don't assume that you don't have one or your organization doesn't have one, okay? So start here for all of you who are new, this hyperlink, the EPA guidelines. And then obviously the open solicitations will get you to each one of the grants, and then that connects you to grants.gov where you will have an actual, the instructions, the documents, right? It's not just the narrative part. You're going to have a bunch of other forms that you will need to fill out. Kind of like, let's see, anti-lobbying, right? Disclosure. There's a bunch of them. SF 425, other things like that, right? All those are necessary. So get into grants.gov sooner rather than later. And if you're a consultant on this phone call, you need to make sure that whoever you're working with, that entity, knows all this stuff, okay? Because the worst thing that could happen is that you do this amazing grant, we review it, and nobody can actually submit it. I had a real situation last year where someone finished up the grant a week ahead of time. Fantastic grant. Yes, they were successful. Okay. But the person who had the password to get into grants.gov had a family emergency and took off. They had the password. They could not be reached. Needless to say, we figured it out. However, just avoid that and make sure that you have everyone's logins, passwords, all those usernames and authorizations, okay? So my best advice is this: if you've never been into grants.gov, read the instructions very, very carefully. I know you hear this a lot, but seriously, every step counts. For instance, I'll just give you one scenario. Okay, it says create an account. When you get into creating a password, grants.gov is funny. They don't allow you to use dictionary words. Okay, so that's just a little tip. Now, when I did this, okay, I didn't know that because I didn't read the directions very carefully. So I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to set up a password, only to realize that maybe I should read the instructions. And when I read the instructions with the no dictionary words, then I realized my mistake. And as soon as I did a nonsensical word, it went through. Okay. That's just a little taste of this. Okay.
Yeah, so the operative word here is actually, it might even be better to start with grants.gov before actually you start writing. Because
Yeah.
once you get carried away writing, then you might forget about doing your grants.gov, and if you do it at the last minute, you might not get on. You might not be able to submit it.
So our audience here, if you are not the entity who is actually going to be doing the applying, make sure that person or entity knows all this information and gets you the clearance and knows that they will get you the clearance by the time November 13th happens. Okay. Do not wait till the last day, because it's never going to happen. All right.
And when you fill these out, you have to assume that you received the grant, because you're actually applying as if you have your team ready to go and when you get the money.
Right.
So it's got the signatories, it's got all your all your bureaucracy set in for this grant.
Right. If you don't understand workspace, then you definitely need to go to grants.gov and read these instructions and make sure your entity is doing this. Okay. So enough about the applying. We're going to get back into the emphasized areas. Okay. All right. Take it away, Ignacio.
CJs. So everyone knows that, well, last year, CJs, which is a map, it's an application that similar to the EJ screen, but they highly recommend using CJs.
Like
this one for determining your target areas and the sites they are in. And this is important because you actually need to be competitive to find sites which are covered in these CJS areas. If you don't, you lose 3 points in a couple of sections. Now, you can use additional information in the detailed demographics in your narrative if you wish. But the key point is find sites within the CJS areas, or you risk losing points.
Yeah, definitely. And this map, so when you get to this hyperlink, right, when you get there, you can Google, right, CJS. There's all the information about it, but you put your address in, right? This box up here in the left-hand corner will come up, and you put in your address, and it will go down to that. I would suggest you zoom out just a little, right? And see your area, because it literally, it could be in the next, like one block over. And if your site kind of is straddling, an area, or, there's wiggle room, just pan out a bit, but also right here, it says track information, track demographics, identified as disadvantaged. Yes, you will get an immediate yes or no, but really you want to look for these gray shaded areas, right? But you see how there's a scroll bar here? When you go down, that's going to give you, and there's way more information, okay, about health disparities, and it'll say the percentile. All that great information needs to be used as data if you can. You're doing data storytelling in your grant. So this is the information that you need to be telling your reviewer in order to paint that picture. I'm not talking about throwing up data on your reviewer. I'm talking about, and sorry for the visual there, but it really feels like that when, you review these grants. You want to make sure that there's this through line, right? And that when you get to the data, when it's being told, it's being put in there at the right time to create the picture in that reviewer's mind of what this project area looks like, what this community looks like, and why this money needs to be at this project and not somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah, and in this case, just looking at the data for this census tract, you can pretty much see the ethnicity. It's 50% white, and quite a few of the other races. And I don't know about you, Joelle, but I think that Oregon is pretty, has a higher white percentage, and so that can play in your narrative. Depending on the project, you just don't use the disparity and not make that relevant to the projects you're suggesting. So
right. Yeah, in this particular example, if you were to scroll down, the health disparities are pretty high. I believe there's a really high rate of asthma, cancer, diabetes. For whatever reason, there is in this particular area. This is why it shaded out. In a lot of these surrounding areas, you can see that it's not disadvantaged. But for some reason, right in this area, it is. But it's because not so much of the demographics, but more so of the income and the health disparities. So.
And again, it's a spirit intent, and you can discuss this again in many states. Climate change and environmental justice aren't actual words that they use every day. And so you can apply, though, the spirit of what CJS is trying to communicate to those areas where you're applying, focusing your grants on.
Okay. So if for whatever reason, CJS does not have the proper information, or you're in an area, this came up, that you cannot use, or you shouldn't be using the word environmental justice or any of these other, terms or whatever, for whatever reason, we're not going to get into politics here. You're going to make sure that the spirit and intent of what this CJS tool is doing is also in your application. Okay. So, and this all ties in with the Justice 40, and the feds have mandated, 40% of the overall benefits, investments flow to disadvantaged communities, right? Underserved, overburdened by pollution. Okay. So that goes into climate change and improving local adaptation and mitigating capacity right there. So these grants are, I don't want to say pivoting, but they are moving towards a higher emphasis, I should say, on climate and economic and environmental justice. Okay, so we've talked about that. These are two great resources, tips, and also the application resources. It's not just one link. That is a link to get you to all these catacombs of other links, okay? Videos, trainings, everything, right? Okay. So we're about halfway through. Sure. About halfway through. So we want to get to a lot of questions or just talk about things that we have seen if people don't have questions, but I'm hoping people have questions. But getting started, as Ignacio said, getting started is really, what do I do now? And hopefully you've heard and will know that your unique ID, right, is a huge thing, and you need to get that done now if you have not gotten it. It's almost like you have to have things concurrent. So if you don't have that unique entity ID, don't freak out. Start it today, start it this week, and have them doing that while you're starting to put things together for the grant, right? Make sure that you review the guidelines, that you're meeting threshold criteria, right? If you're going for a cleanup grant and you don't have your APCA, right, Analysis of Brownfields Cleanup Alternatives, if you don't have that, there's going to be an issue. Also, don't forget, you need the community notification, right? 30 days before the application is due. So the last time, what does that put you at? Or 2 weeks, not 30 days, 2 weeks. You have to have noticed a public meeting. That's in the threshold criteria under the cleanup grant. We're not going to have a quiz right now, so go look it up, okay? But the community notification is huge, as well as the APCA, right, for threshold criteria for cleanup grants. Grants.gov, we already talked about this, about registration, authorized users. If you have questions about threshold criteria, EPA, the regional EPA offices, brownfields coordinators in Region 10, it is, we can get you to the right people if you have questions. Sometimes we can answer those, but honestly, threshold criteria questions, we refer right to EPA because those are legal issues. Ignacio's already gone over this, right? Gather your team info, roles, stakeholder partners. Why is this so important, Ignacio?
Well, for one thing, if you're going to have participant support costs, you're going to have to find out how much they need, how many target areas. So for each of these target areas that you have, many have more than one. You'll have to reach out, and they help with the work plan, they help with the budget, they help with the activity. And again, we see many applications that focus on just one aspect of the brownfield activities and miss out on the planning, the outreach, the process of actually selecting sites, selecting new sites. So, and you can only get those from your partners and stakeholders. You can't rely on just consultants to figure these out.
I think also knowing, it's not just, getting a person's name and their title and their phone number. It's not enough to just say so-and-so or a representative from this organization, like, this watershed council. You're like, who? What's their experience? How do they tie into this project, right? You have to have a cohesive team, not just a barrage of 20 names, okay? Bullet your ideas first, right? If it's overwhelming, if writing seems to be overwhelming you, bullet under each section, because I'm going to tell you why this is really helpful. You do not want to repeat information in other sections. If you send us a draft to review, and we see information that's, in another section that you've already talked about in the first section, that you are going to lose points. Okay, not with us, with EPA. Okay, you don't want to repeat your information. You can always refer to it as noted in section 1-2A. Okay, right? But you don't want to repeat the information. The reviewer already has been told that. They're going to remember that you already said it, and it's like, you were supposed to only talk about this in section 1. You're now talking about it again in section 3. Again, you can reference it, just don't talk about it again. All right.
Yeah, our website has those to-dos and don'ts for the grant writing. We're not going to go through them here, but there are quite a few that we recommend to just make you focus and not fill up the sheet with meaningless words.
Right. So we talked about data, talked about, the budget. Budget should always match up with your story. So if you are doing a lot of assessment work, if you're doing a lot of community outreach, right, but your community outreach budget is $15,000, what's going on there, right? So your budget also tells a story. If you only saw a budget, you would be able to see or tell a few things about what you're going to be actually reading to. And sometimes I look at a budget first. Describe the plan. We've already talked about that, not just listing things.
Yeah, so I think that the operative word there, and if you can do face-to-face or Zoom meetings with your stakeholders, you probably should be doing that next week or so, because it helps you refine your budget, and you can actually put it down in your grant application. So that always helps.
I have found that to be even more competitive, it's better to say that you've been meeting, right? You've been meeting as a group, right? Than just we will be meeting. That's great. You will be meeting, but there's no proof of concept. Yeah, we've been meeting for the past 6 months in anticipation of this grant. That shows you've already been thinking about this. You are dedicated. You've got, proof of concept. You already got the people together. They know what's coming down the pipeline, and you guys are ready to go when it happens. Okay. Tips and insights for those of you who have not done this before. My biggest thing is knowing your why. The why is your purpose of even writing this grant, of what, yes, you're going to get the money. Why are you going to do it? It's the why, it's the purpose. The purpose should be the through line throughout the entire grant. The purpose will guide you throughout every section. If you don't have a purpose, you don't have a why, writing this grant will be very tough. Okay. So if you're a consultant, you shouldn't understand the why of your client. Okay. If you don't understand that, we won't understand it either when we review it, or EPA. Economy of words. Ignacio, what are your favorite words that you like to strike out? Anything with an LY?
Very.
Very. Yeah, very. We're a great team. What makes you a great team? Watch the superlatives.
Right.
And yeah, keep it objective. Watch the subjective language. You may think you're the best thing since sliced bread, and maybe you are the best thing since sliced bread, but you need to have data, and you need to have, we're the best because we have implemented 400 affordable housing units in the past 2 years, because we know how to leverage various funding, and this funding would then leverage $40 additional million. It's that layering, right? It's that proof of concept.
Back it up with numbers or data. That's easy. No. If you can do that, then you don't need to justify using superlatives. So.
That's exactly it. Those are those blue ribbons. The blue ribbons, I say this to people all the time, because I say, well, if I'm going to give you the money, if Ignacio comes to me, I'm EPA, or, just someone with a lot of money, and he says, hey, I need 2 million for this project. And I'm going to say, okay, well, how are you going to make me look good? Like, I want to see metrics, and metrics are blue ribbons. So if I give you $2 million, you're going to show me, right, acres of park, or asthma is reduced, or low birth weights are, now on, not the rise, but they're lowering, and we've got safer streets to walk or something, because the kids can actually now get to the schools, or whatever it is. Those metrics are blue ribbons, and that shows off EPA. And everybody wants to show off EPA because they're the ones that are giving you the money. But showing off EPA means they're going to get showed off to Congress, and Congress is all about appropriations. And so this funding is all about appropriations. So if we keep wanting, we want to keep getting brownfields funding, right? It's a bipartisan, area of funding that usually, both sides of the aisle agree on. Okay. So we talked about a team being solid, the budgets, oh my gosh, accurate and simple. Do not get into 23 cents, 89 cents, like keep it very simple, rounded numbers, and everything adds up. I can tell you, I don't know about you, Ignacio, but if I look at a budget, and this is why I start with a budget first, okay? I go right to somebody's budget and I review it. If the numbers don't add up, I'm going to return your draft, because the attention to detail, if it's not in your budget, it's probably not in your writing. So I know tough love is all it's all me. I don't know about you, Ignacio, but that's attention. You will lose so many points with an error in your math.
Yeah, enough said on that one.
Right?
Right.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
Justifications. Just remember your justifications. If you put down $15,000 for travel, but it's totally justified because you're in Alaska, just put down the justification. All right. Here are more tips, right? Proofreading. I don't think I need.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
the writer. Give it to somebody else to proofread. You're too close to it, and that's a micro issue. So give it to somebody else for proofreading. Ignacio, you talked about data. Answer the questions completely. Don't skirt them. Pretend it's your money. Check the grammar, the spelling, everything. Use that ABC, the editor on the Word. If you're doing things in Microsoft Word,
They are so much better now. I mean,
gosh, use editor. It'll make you better.
I think when we review, if it's, I think you the review the tool is so good now. If you usually get a score of 96 to 100 if you actually do it well, and if you're not doing that, the tips are actually pretty good. So yeah, use the grammar check.
Right.
They're very useful.
I'm going to say this really quickly. ChatGPT, is it amazing? Yeah, it's amazing. Use it to write a grant? No, don't write it. Don't do that. Just don't. Okay. Can you use it for an outline to help you with outlining or maybe, economy of words? Sure, but it'll come across as AI written, and there's programs that can also be used to spyware or AIware that detects artificial intelligence writing. So it'll just be better when you write it. Okay. Procurement.
Here we go.
Here we go. We're not going to spend much time on this. Okay. If you are not familiar with 2 CFR 200, you should be. Even if you're an entity or a consultant, you should know what 2 CFR 200 is. This is the uniform guidance as far as the Code of Federal Regulations that talks about procurement, and everything went under 200 or the super circular. We won't get into 2 CFR 200, but try not to be not in compliance with this. And this is pretty, I think Sarah or Lujane is putting in the chat about a procurement webinar that I recently did. And also as far as what are the do's and don'ts. With this particular, if you're an entity or you are working on an RFP that you provided language to, or they're using federal funds for the grant writing procurement, there are definitely guidelines on this. And even if the grant is awarded, so if you got the award, they're going to go back and see how this was procured, this particular grant writing services. Okay. So if people have questions about this, just email us. Okay. Because it's a little bit, it's complicated. And just don't use sample language and templates from contractors. Okay. Planning to bid. That's one of the biggest things. You just want to make sure it's open and free competition. All right. If you're using your own general obligation funds, this is only with respect to using federal funds. All right.
Right. If you're using your funds, then the rules are different.
Right.
And also, we know we're sending you to a lot of webinars to watch. These webinars typically an hour and a half long. Tip, there is a speed button. You can watch them fast. So, and they tend to be repetitive. So,
Right.
look for the speed button or advance it if it's getting too repetitive. So on to our, why are we here? How can CClear help you? Well, we have grant review services, and they are outlined in our website. We have the tips there. You can review successful applications, and Joelle and our team No, we have a very good record of helping improve. We don't guarantee it, but and we'll continue to be well, modesty aside, right?
Right.
We're
Modesty
I think we're pretty good. So
we're almost at a 90% success rate. And I think it was even higher in region 10. Not that there's any competition, but so here are these are the due dates, all right, guys. And I know some of you are like, wait, you used to do these reviews all the way up until, the day of that they're due. I don't know, Ignacio. We talked about these, and the thing is that 80% draft. So if you want a thorough review, okay, this is what we're talking about. There's not a lot of time. You've got less than 5 weeks. And for you to incorporate our comments will take you, at least another week or so to do that, right? And then we'll look at it again, but we're talking about the first drafts here. They need to be 80% there, because there's no point in us just giving you back. And in fact, if the rubric comes back, and this is what we're talking about, that is a note, please, consultants include applicant's contact information and copy the applicant. If we do not see the applicant CC'd or don't have their information, it won't be forwarded to us for review, okay, until that information is provided. So this rubric, right? If you don't do 80% of what is required, this rubric will be all red, right? And that's not going to help you whatsoever. And it's just going to be our, waste of time. And we don't want to waste anybody's time. There's just not time. And so you want all these to be green. Okay, you don't want them to be red. A few yellows, okay, that means improvement, right? But you want them to be helpful to you. So going back, right, make sure your application checklist, this is on our website too, right? The spell check, confirm the page limit, right? If you send us your draft and it's 22 pages long, the chances of us getting it or helping you to get it to 11 or 12 is next to impossible. All right. Not even the best formatting is going to help. And I think there's a font size. Is it 11 or 12?
it's 12.
12. So even putting your narrow margins and everything else, especially with now you have to do plans instead of just listing out everything with respect to outcomes and outputs. You still have to do those things, but you also have to write about the plan. So these are the due dates. However, anything received after we'll consider on a case-by-case basis. Okay.
Now there's a question here because it's online, so and it's related to the actually the length of the document. Footnotes or let's say footnotes or citation are enough, and I've seen both. The information has to be enough that it can be checked. I don't know if it's an eligibility issue though, then you have to check with EPA first. And the question is about a record of decision. I think that's what it is. Anything, when I see a RODS in a question, I think that's an eligibility and threshold question. That's a record of decision.
That's a record of decision. That's usually with Superfund sites.
Right. And so those tend to be out of our our pay scale.
Our pay grade.
Right. Yeah, because they have to check with other, maybe perhaps other offices within the EPA region. So,
right.
So if it's threshold, check with them. If it's, if it's data that's easily checked or, fact checked, then a citation is fine. You can make it as descriptive as possible. But we don't see a lot. We don't see a lot of people with a lot of footnotes either.
If you were to review successful applications, I'm going to go out here and say that a lot of those do not have a ton of footnotes, citations, any of that stuff. This is not a, a dissertation. It's an application that is supposed to be accessible to all, right? So if you're talking about things and the data should just be, according to the census or census.gov in parentheses, right? If you're talking about various things that have to have a site, make them short, but enough that a person could get to it if they needed to, hyperlink it, right? But I don't see a lot of footnotes in, successful grants. A few, but no more than like five footnotes. Okay.
Getting to the end here and to your questions.
Yeah. Okay. So,
love.
Yep, the tough love. Everything
but again,
is good intentions. It's good intentions.
The sooner you get it to us, the sooner we can review it a second time. And again, we have some people, some applicants submitted once. We do have no idea if they incorporate our recommendations. The second time, we'll know better, and and actually, I think a second review increases your chances even more. So first review, maybe we don't know if you take them or not. And some people actually admit that, we didn't have time to incorporate your tough love. So don't make our love unrequited.
I mean, honestly, when I started out, and I've been fortunate enough, I guess, or I just pay attention to the cadence of writing. It's not supposed to be so difficult. Are they competitive? Yes, they're competitive. But honestly, if you just write well and you have a good story, you have a really good chance. Just attention to detail and tell a good story. If you give it to me or anybody and it's a snoozer in the first paragraph, like you don't have their attention, that's a pretty good indication that you won't have the reviewer's attention, right? Read successful grants, just get the feeling of the cadence and how they weave the information in. It's probably one of the best things you can do when you have limited time is to read other successful grants. And there's plenty of them out there. They're always out there on the EPA website. They pull them as soon as the solicitation for the next year's grant goes up. But they put out the successful and the unsuccessful ones out there. On our website, there is successful. I know NJIT has them, KSU has them. I believe each tab provider has a bunch of them. And I know I keep a bunch too from years and years ago. So anyway, are there any other questions?
Is this our last slide? We have a couple more. Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's our last slide. So any questions?
I know we're so good. We got it right in, and it's 2:58. Parting remarks. EPA cannot talk about projects. They can only talk about eligibility. So eligibility as it applies to the threshold criteria, not as in eligibility of the project. We can talk to you a little bit about that, but we have pretty strict guidelines on that. So eligibility gets into legal issues. So, and I know this webinar will be available, and the recording will be up on YouTube. So that should be up in a few days, probably this week. So if there are no other questions, I think we're going to wrap this up and wish everyone good luck. And also, please send your questions regarding any of the grants or when to submit drafts or give us a heads up. We always appreciate that too, to say, hey, someone on this webinar, I'm not going to say who your name is, but we appreciate you writing in and letting us know when to expect your grant. That's very helpful. And any time frames that you guys have as far as restrictions is also appreciated. Okay.
All right, and
Good luck, everyone.
maybe the last thing is maybe someone's asking,
Yeah.
how long does it take us to review a grant application? So we don't promise anything, but last year it was definitely less than 5 days.
It was definitely less than 5 days. The sooner you get them into us now, it's a quicker turnaround time. I can say with pretty confident that as they get closer to the due date, it gets tougher and tougher to get, a 72-hour turnaround time or even a 48-hour turnaround time. And we've done it. We've turned them around in 24 hours when we are working with folks who are absolutely dedicated. They're on their, last year was like third or fourth revision. It was also a successful grant, but they just dialed it in and they just wanted the help, and we will absolutely make every effort to assist. But usually within 5 days, but as we get closer to the due date, you're not going to get that as much, especially if it's the first draft. If it's the first draft, that's on a case-by-case basis.
All right, so
Ready?
all right, well, I think we can say see your application soon.
Good luck, everyone.
All right.